Hello again, friends, and thank you for joining me. It's Bill Spady, and I'm here with yet another chapter in the unfolding drama, in some respects, that has been my inner journey, what I call my amazing journey of spiritual growth, because the things I'm going to be revealing in this video truly were amazing to me. And I want to share them with you because I think there are some very significant things within those experiences that you can grab onto and experience and utilize in your own growth and know that they aren't weird or strange or exceptional, whatever. They're part of those underlying dimensions that lie within us that we have yet to really probe and open up. So let's remember that where we left off is that I had been involved in an endeavor with Neale Walsh that we were going to call Heartlight Learning Communities. And we began to put this endeavor together somewhere in the neighborhood of 2001. And that meant an enormous amount to me because not only did it allow me to fulfill my sense of life purpose more fully, but it also put me in engagement with a whole range of other people who were doing enlightening work. So being around Neale and with the people who knew him and the people who had also volunteered to be involved in this Heartlight endeavor, I grew to learn more and more about other important individuals in their lives who were doing deep, deep work of various kinds. So I learned, I absorbed. It's like, this is what I want to do. I want to grow in this direction while I'm pursuing the education part of it. Well, one of those individuals was a man named Tom Kenyon. And Tom is a profound psychic sound healer, okay, through the use of sound. And what Tom focuses on, among other things, is the messages and the sound transmissions that he receives from these beings that Mona Lisa talked about, the Hathors. Not only that, but Tom has written a book with the assistance of a woman named Virginia Assine called The Hathor Material. And all of this is available on his website. But I have attended several workshops with Tom, both prior to and certainly since the experience that I'm about to share with you. So I knew about Tom Kenyon. I knew about Hathors. I had read the Hathor book. Okay, it was something familiar to me when I got a phone call one morning from the same woman, Barb Honflon, who had introduced me to Mona. Well, this time she said, you know, there's going to be a workshop here in town that you might want to attend. And the workshop is being conducted by a woman named Dr. Sue Myers. It's about soul healing and soul revelations of who you are and manifesting the power of that soul more fully in your life, etc. And I was all in. It said, yeah, boy, I would like to go to that. So I signed up and we began a 3-day experience focused on what kind of soul do you have? What is the nature of that soul? What does it resonate with? Et cetera, et cetera. And in what ways does it contribute to your life? And how can we make that better? How can we get the densities and the barriers that are present in your life out of the way so that that soul can function more fully? So that was what the 3 days were all about. And on the first day, she gave us a whole variety of things to work on, et cetera, that basically exposed some of that information about us and about our inclinations while she energetically tested, yes, using kinesiology, good old arm testing. She relied on that extensively in the workshop to basically tell her what's really true about each individual. There were about 14 of us in the group who were participating. So we had done day one and we got to day two. And day two was focused on identifying the nature of your soul. What kind of soul do you have based on this system that she called her light body work system? Okay, that different kinds of souls convey a different kind of light body energy. And this system she created was she would rattle off numbers which had nothing to do with one soul is better than another. It was simply to identify what these souls were. And she explained this was for angelic souls, this number was for other souls working in partnership with each other, blah, blah, blah. I mean, so she went through this system. And she always emphasized that the number 33 was for Hathors, okay, which Mona had talked about and which Tom Kenyon had written about. So it's like, okay, well, boy, she's really into Hathors here, among other things. Well, the light body level for Hathors was 33. And I think maybe one or two people in the group, came up with Hathor. But when it was my turn, out went the arm and we counted through all of the things. And she got to the number 33 and the arm stayed up. And I'm looking at the arm and saying to myself, oh my goodness, well, okay, I guess, yeah, here it is. This is what seems to be true. And you might say there was a break in the action. And she was tuning into a guide that she works with, who guides her in the kinds of questions to ask or the kinds of things to move the direction of the discussion forward, depending on who she's working with at the time. And she says, I need to keep counting. Okay. I certainly don't understand what that's about, but she starts counting, okay? And she basically is saying, I need to find out what the light body level is of this Hathor of yours, okay? Now that she had identified Hathor. So she counts, and we end up with 50, and the number 50. And she says her technique, by the way, for in working with anyone, as soon as you've identified something, she says, and what does this mean to you? So she says, 50th light body level Hathor, what does this mean to you? And she throws the question before your rational mind can digest it, and then you start figuring things out and coming up with answers. She wants to know what your soul knows because she's taking notes for day 3. So she says, 50th light body level, Hathor, what does this mean to you? And this flash happened, and I said, am I a member of the Council of 12? Now, where did I get Council of 12? Well, Mona had talked about this. There's this group of Hathor sitting around this table, and it looks kind of like a council table, okay? And there are 11 of them, and they invite her, which would have made 12, but that would have required some arithmetic and some thinking, etc. And I said, Council of 12, and the arm stayed up. And she immediately asked, do you know any others? That is, are there any other people here on Earth who are also members of that council that you know? Well, the first thing I say is Mona, and the arm stays up. And the second thing I say is Bruce. And Bruce is my very, very close friend who's an electronic genius, who I'll be describing to you in later episodes here because he did a lot of shamanic work with me when I went to the desert in Utah, but that's a next chapter. So I say those two, and I couldn't think of any others, and she just wrote the notes down. So I go home after day two in some kind of shock, basically saying, holy moly, okay, my soul is a member of this Hathor group, 12, 12 members of a council I know nothing about. I'm totally oblivious to that. Oh my goodness, what does this mean? Well, I got up the next morning and it was my birthday, and I had forgotten it was my birthday because all I could think about is this 50th light body level Hathor. And off I go to the workshop, and the workshop is about then doing soul healing and integrating of all of these things based on the kind of soul you have and the other things that she finds out in this process. Well, another fellow who was in the group had worked with her before in another workshop. So he's the first one that she calls up. So I witness all of the questions and all of the things that she asked him and the process that they went through, which was very elaborate, et cetera, et cetera. And, just found that of interest. And she calls me up second and then says, I've been guided to process people in this order. So I come up second. The first thing she says is, well, before we get started on this, I need to find out about the spiritual history of this Hathor of yours. Okay, she keeps referring it, this Hathor of mine. Okay, so out goes the arm. So she asks, how many lifetimes? Okay, speaking to the Hathor now, how many lifetimes were you a monk? And she starts counting, and pretty soon she's counting by tens, and then she finally gets to the number 42. And she just nonchalantly writes down, okay, 42 lifetimes as a monk. And we never sorted out, do we mean Buddhist monk, or do we mean Catholic monk, or what other kind of monk do we mean? It's just 42 lifetimes as a monk, and she writes that down. Well, how many times were you a priest? Okay, and we write that down. I think that was 14. And 14 times as a priest. Okay, thank you. How many times were you a nun? And we write down how many times I was a nun. And then we get to two that I found really, really interesting. How many times were you a shaman? Okay, 12 times as a shaman. She writes that down. How many times were you a guru? Bill Spady, a guru? No, the Hathor soul in the lifetime of a guru. Okay, and that was 12, and she writes that down. And she says, well, what else is there? And then there's another of these pregnant silences. And she's checking in. And she eventually says, a scene. Now, as it turns out, in retrospect, she and I were the only two people in the room of the 14 participants and a couple of assistants who knew what the Essenes were. And I only knew it partially and superficially from the fact that I had been to Israel, and that in touring down by the Red Sea, etc., we had stopped at an archaeological site called Qumran, which was where the Essenes lived. And the Essenes were the ones who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. And she says, well, how many lifetimes were you an Essene? Meaning the Hathor soul. And this is another case where we start counting in decades or in tens, and we get to 60 and the arm finally goes down. And she says, all right, we have to find out. So she counts back 60, 59, 58, etc. And the arm finally stays up at 55. And she just simply says, 55 lifetimes as an Essene, what does this mean to you? And all that was in my mind is the fact that Jesus's brother James had been, because I'd read about this somewhere, had been the head of the Essene community at Qumran. And to my knowledge at that time, which was very incomplete and imperfect, Qumran was the only Essene site in Israel at that time. Well, there was also speculation in the things that I had read. Well, if James had been in the scene, then certainly his brother Jesus would have dropped by, okay, occasionally and visited or spent some time there. So that very imprecisely was just floating in my head. And she says, what does this mean to you? And I said, well, did I know Jesus? And she said, what else? Okay, because the arm stayed up. And this wave of cold energy came into me. It's like, oh my God. She says, what else? And I didn't know what else to say. And my intuitive somewhere, maybe my soul said, was I one of the 12 disciples? And the arm stayed up. And my life changed. Not in a happy way. The heavy, I mean, there was just this shock of energy going in me about, oh my God, oh my God. But she just writes down, oh, one of the 12 disciples, which one were you? Okay, as fast as she can fire it out there. And all I could think about is all of the outside the box transformative stuff I had been writing and doing about in education. Okay. And I just said, John. And she fires back, there were two Johns. And I mean, this is hard to describe. My head is swimming. I mean, I am just absolutely blank. And I say very unkind words. I don't give a damn how many Johns there were. I'm the one that wrote Revelations, and the arm stayed up. And the group out there witnessing this were in hysteria. Absolute hysteria. The women were screaming and they were crying, and the guys were on the floor and yelling, oh my God, etc. And I'm sitting there numb, absolutely numb. And she's just writing down the information. Okay, John, who wrote Revelations, okay. And she witnesses all these people just losing their minds and says, well, I was told I would meet one soon, meaning somebody who was carrying this discipleship soul, a disciple's soul. Oh my God. Oh my God. What this has done for me in its first phase was simply overwhelm me with guilt. Oh my gosh. If this is true, if this is true, okay, then but how would a soul like that want to come in to a guy named Bill Spady who you know who is so mortal, who is so imperfect, who is all the things running through my mind, inadequacies, blah blah blah, all the things. And she says, "Well, we need to find out if this is your birth soul or uh, a walk-in soul." Well, I had certainly never heard of a walk-in, and I assumed she'd been talking about a birth soul. But it turns out that the Hathor is a walk-in. That is, it came into my life we literally did the date. It was in at the end of January in 1990. And so she writes all of this down and she says, well, what was happening in your life in 1990 that changed? And boy, oh boy, I said, oh my gosh, 1990 was the year that my colleague, Dr. Charles Schwann, and I created this whole new model about future focused education and how to define it and how to do this and how to work with all of these things in the future, et cetera. And there was nothing like this anywhere in education because education was curriculum focused instead of future focused. So anyway, what happened in our work is it just a whole new paradigm of thinking and design work and possibilities just exploded on the stage nationally because I was in a national position with a lot of visibility, etc. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And she just writes this stuff down. Okay, visiting soul. How many times did this Hathor partner, and how many times was it a partner with your birth soul? Oh, 22 times. Okay, well, in 22 lifetimes, those two have come together. Okay, and then we test some more because, you know, they know each other and they're good friends and they're one thing and another. And then she finds out that I'm blaming my mother for not having this Hathor soul be born with me as a twin. I wanted a twin. Well, guess what? You didn't get a twin, you got a walk in. Oh, God. All right. So that's that part of the story. Now, what do you take away from that? Well, number one, many of us have walk-ins. Number two, the walk-in is different from the birth soul. Yes, we have all been many, 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 many things in unbelievable numbers of lifetimes that our soul has come to visit, either here on earth or in other dimensions, beings in other dimensions, but it's all bigger than we can comprehend. So when something really significant like this opens up, just know it's more than we've ever been taught. It's more than we've ever come to believe. It's not what our institutions and our religions and our cultures and generally most families have taught their kids is the truth about who they are. Who you are is incredibly vaster, bigger, more complex, more expansive, etc., than the 3D roll and boxes and perceptions and five senses, five physical senses that we carry around in our physical bodies. That's what to carry away. Well, this happened as I was doing work with Neale Donald Walsh. And in 2003, there was a meeting of the sort of board of directors that we had created and other leaders about the Heartlight work that came together for a meeting in Portland, Oregon, at the very time, end of June, that Neale and another fellow who had sort of volunteered and stepped in, Steve Farrell, they were going to create an initiative called Humanities Team, which was really to offer a sort of expansive educational experience and growth experience for adults in the world using the CWG Conversations with God work, but other people who were doing wonderful, deep inner work with individuals. Well, I recommend go to Humanities Team, watch that unfold. Well, what happened is the board meeting coincided with the launching of Humanities Team, and Neale gave me and James Colin, the fellow who had put up a lot of funding for Heartlight, an opportunity to speak briefly at this event so people could see what was happening with Heartlight itself. Well, he gave us 10 minutes and we explained about Heartlight. I explained that people in Australia were interested. We already had a site sort of under works and design down in South Africa. We had different sites in North America, and the audience was just going crazy. I mean, applauding and yelling and cheering and all this stuff. And so after the 10 minutes, we go and sit down, and they're still yelling and screaming. And this woman comes up to me and says, I really need to talk to you when this is over. It's like, okay, all right, I'm not going anywhere. Well, the woman says, after it's all over, I have these friends who are shamans. They live in Utah. They do extraordinary work. I think you should work with them. Okay, I think you should benefit from the work that they do. It's incredible work. I totally trust and respect them, etc. Well, I contacted the shamans who have chosen to be anonymous here throughout all of this. We had a first session late in the fall of 2003. And my mind was opened and boggled to another whole dimension of what exists really getting inside of Native American consciousness, okay? And the spiritual system and the feelings and the honorings of energies and things that they routinely do because that's what was being practiced. Well, as we went out into the desert, we left the main roads and we went off into this area. And as we drove through, maybe for just a quarter of a mile, to get to the site where they wanted to do the work, we passed a herd of cattle. And the shaman's wife says, oh, cattle are a great omen. Because cattle carry the energies as buffalo do of abundance and all of these things. She said, we're going to have a great experience out here. Okay, well, that was news to me, but I was willing. I mean, yes, okay, fine. So we get out to the site and they're setting the site up. And I'm just kind of walking around and she says, oh, look, there are two eagles up there. And the eagles are an omen for high-powered work, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the eagles circles around and lands on this big giant rock where we were working at the base of this rock. Okay, the eagle stayed there the entire time that we were there doing the work. So 2 or 3 things about the work, okay, that I think is valuable. In the work, what the work we did was very controlled, very measured. Nothing was wild and crazy. Nothing was taking some drug, et cetera, that blows your mind out. It was all very gentle. It was focused on opening the heart and just experiencing what happens when you go into sort of a first level of higher consciousness. Okay, just out of 3D here being the only plane of consciousness and perception that you can manage. So I eventually go into this elevated state and begin what they call walking the fire. And they had built a fire, and the fire is the symbol, okay, of the transformation going inside of each cell that is clearing and opening to new possibilities, okay, to greater potentials, okay, to greater expansion of who you are, etc. So I'm walking the fire and walking the fire, and then they explain that the walking is literally walking in the new energy into your DNA. It's like walking it into the spiral of your DNA. Okay, I doubt nothing. I am walking, and what I'm doing is simply saying the words of whatever happens to come into my mind in this state of somewhat stupor, saying those words. I am love. I am love. And you say, I am love until the next thing comes. Okay? All are love, etc. Whatever the words are, you say those words and you're walking them in. And finally, or I should say eventually, the words come out of my mouth. I am Kaleem. I am Kaleem. Now, going back to Tom Kenyon and Tom Kenyon's Hathor book, The Hathor Material, he explains that the sacred energies of earth, fire, air, and water, okay, which the Native Americans honor, the Hathors also honor. Okay? Earth, air, fire, water, all right? And Ka is the Hathor word for fire, and Leem is the Hathor word for water. And Kaleem is basically the synthesis of the two things. And I realized, oh, that's the name of this Hathor. And all of the energy testing that I have done over the years ever since, that is over 20 years of it, that name has stuck. Kaleem, is who I refer to as this Hathor that is accompanying my birth soul in this period of living here on earth. So those early years, those very, very early years of identifying with, connecting with, expanding around this issue and the concept of the Hathors has been absolutely extraordinary for me. And I'm willing to venture and guess, since I've learned much more about what are called interdimensional beings, like Palladians, like Octurians, and others. There are all these species of highly evolved beings out there. We have much, much to learn and appreciate as humans about the fact that indeed we are not alone and we are being blessed and supported by forces, energy, civilizations, etc., communities of highly evolved beings and light workers, etc., out there in the universe they're all here to support us. They're all here to support us. Some of them we call guardian angels, okay, who we think, are just specifically kind of their assigned duty is working with us. I call the team that I know, and it's expanding and expanding more all the time, but I know and call that team spirit partners, my team, spirit partners, right? But there's many names. There are many, many kinds of these support systems for us, including God / Allah / the Great Spirit / and all kinds of other names, Yahweh, etc. / source, etc. All of these names, whatever that essence is out there, whatever that incredible source energy is that has created the universe and everything in it, okay, that's here too. That's here too. So from my experiences, and that takes us up to and through 2003 only, there were revelations, transformations, etc., that were just beyond belief. However, I carried the assumption, if I'm walking around with a companion soul of this power, etc., oh boy, I'd better get to work and live a different life. It almost came to me as an obligation. Believe me, that's not how it works. But that's what I believed, because I believed I had to earn the right, that I had to earn the right to have that kind of soul support. Not true. Not true. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to earn in order to get whatever level of soul support is going to be there for you. And it's vast. It's enormous. There is no limit to how big, how vast, how wonderful, etc., anybody's team of spirit partners or guides or whatever is. They're all there wanting us to thrive, succeed, flourish, and grow on the inside. Be more, expand more, etc. That's the simple message. Now, from that point on, more and more and more and more kinds of things happened and unfolded. And I'm going to be sharing, okay, the things that I feel have been, not everything, because there have been too many of them, but the things that I feel have been real turning points, real revelations, real paradigm shifts in my conception of reality, the reality of what's out there, the reality of what's in here for Bill Spady. Because what's in here for me is in there for you as well. And our goal, straightforward, is find ways for you to discover that and embody that. Because the more you do, the richer, the deeper, the more wonderful your life's going to be. So thank you for this episode. I look forward to the next one. We'll have a lot of fun. And pretty soon I'm going to be saying, fasten your seatbelts as we start each one, because some of the manifestations of this work get just more and more incredible. So thanks. See you next time. And be well. Bye-bye.